You are listening to Grab Them by the Pod, a member of the ACE Podcast Network. Thank you for joining us here at Grab Them by the Pod on this, our President's Day edition of the show. I am Kevin along with Jesse, and we've got a lot to talk about tonight. So, Jess, what's on the docket?
Well, before we get started, it's important to say, first of all, our favorite presidents are both Roosevelts. They just happen to be different Roosevelts. But, you know, the fact that we like presidents with the same last names shows a bond that brings this podcast together.
Certainly doesn't. You know, while I favor one Roosevelt over the other, I do appreciate the other Roosevelt as well. So there's common ground. We can meet in the middle.
Definitely. I also want to just congratulate you, Kevin, on our one-year anniversary. Now, it's technically on Wednesday, recording this on a Tuesday, but it's been a year since we put out our first episode. And when we put that first episode out, I barely had a voice. I didn't know whether this podcast was going to stick around or go anywhere. And I think it's been a successful episode. And 48 episodes, which we averaged one a week in a year, isn't bad. So we had a couple of vacations, a couple of things going on during the year, but not a bad showing.
Not at all. And, you know, I couldn't be more proud. I've had a grand old time doing this with you, and I look for many more episodes to come.
Even more articles featuring us in the years to come.
We can only hope. Time Magazine, you know, the New Yorker, look out.
Yeah. Today, America, tomorrow, the world. Well, you know, I want to put some of that jovial, good-natured banter aside as we talk about something really serious. We start off this podcast, and of course, it's the shooting that happened last week in Florida. As everybody knows, last Wednesday, Nicholas Cruz, who's a former student, went to Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School and killed 17 people, both students and teachers, using a gun. It was an AR-15, and he was later apprehended, but the damage was done. And honestly, those children will never be the same again. And I put down a quote here that, you know, it had to do with 9/11, but it really just struck me. It was actually the first thing that came to my mind. It was David Letterman's first show back after 9/11, and one of the things he said that if you live to be 1,000 years old, will any of that make sense? And really, every time I hear that another shooting at a school has taken place, it's really just comes to my mind. I just can't understand. I can't even fathom how this stuff happens.
And the answer is no. It will never make sense, no matter how old we are and no matter how far away we get from it, because it's preventable.
There's so much that can be done. It just needs to be acted upon. And that's one of the things we're going to be talking about as we move through this. What can be done? What should have been done? I mean, Kevin, you're a teacher. Your wife's a teacher. I mean, how real is this fear to you guys in your everyday life?
Well, you know, as these are tending to become more and more regular and happening with more frequency, it does impact you in your job as a teacher. You know, we practice lockdown drills, fire drills, these type of emergency drills throughout the year. And, you know, you always have to keep in the back of your mind that at some point, the reason why we're practicing this is that at some point we may have to use this in real time. And, you know, in the days immediately following any one of these tragedies, be it Sandy Hook or Parkland, Florida, any of the numerous school shootings that have happened over the last 15, 20 years, you automatically, you know, it's kind of a knee jerk that the next time an alarm goes off at your school, you're questioning, is this real? You're waiting for gunshots. You're waiting to make sure that you do take pause for a moment to think about, well, what will I do if this really is real? And the idea that these thoughts went through people's heads at Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, I can only imagine.
And these kind of things really do hit home. Even if you go back to Sandy Hook, one of the teachers who died went to school with us. I don't think either of us really knew her. I think I may have been in one class with her, but I never spoke to her. But just the fact that she was that close to us means that it can happen to anybody. And there are lots of people who went to school who did know her, and they actually ended up putting a scholarship together for her, which was fantastic. But, you know, these things affect everybody. So what do we know about the things that led up to? So the Broward Sheriff deputies were called to the Cruz family house 39 times since 2010. So whether it's this Nicholas himself or the family, there's something that wasn't right there, and that's a red flag right there. Also, the shooter's former neighbor said that Cruz would point BB guns and shoot it at homes and do target practice. If you look at his Instagram account, he would post things with rifles and firearms on his bed. What someone his age needs all those guns for, I'll never know. He legally purchased the firearm that he used in the shooting at a gun store in Coral Springs, Florida. I don't understand why some of these guys they can buy guns before they can buy beer, and that just doesn't seem right. And I'm not a gun guy. I'm not pretending that I'm versed in gun policy or even mental health policy. But when I think about someone who's 19 being able to buy an AR-15, it just does not seem right to me.
Well, that makes for a very good and plausible argument of why young adults at 18, 19, and 20 years old cannot buy alcohol legally in this country, but they can purchase semi-automatic assault rifles. That it doesn't seem to make sense, because we know science and research has proven that the brain is not fully formed until well into the 20s. So why is this person at 19 years old wanting to buy an assault rifle? What is their plan of action? Why are they purchasing this gun? And as we see, sadly is the case, as oftentimes is with these mass shootings, all of the telltale signs of an unstable individual with access to an abundance of guns was available. And that just is a recipe for disaster.
And you're right when it comes to teenagers. I always go around and say that high schoolers are idiots. It's not their fault. They just haven't learned enough yet. But I may have to dial that back a little bit. For all of the bad things we see when it comes to someone like Nicholas Cruz, I want to say I am so impressed with these students. I want to give them as much praise as humanly possible. A lot of people, myself included, like I just said, like to bust in this generation. I'm not sure anybody I went to school with was like this poised, this well-spoken, and frankly, this brave to be able to handle the aftermath as a lot of these students. I've seen a lot of these children do multiple interviews. They've sent out tweets. They've been calling out the president. They've been calling out members of Congress. They've been going to lobby on behalf of these things. And the media yells at them for not getting involved beforehand, then yells at them for actually getting involved. I mean, I've seen some disgusting things going around the internet the last few days. They're saying that some of these students aren't even really students, that they're crisis actors that go from place to place. Somebody is saying that one of the students who's been giving interviews, his father's a former retired FBI agent, so he's part of the plot. And these things have been shared 150,000 times on Facebook, and it just disgusts me. These people have been through an experience that we'll never, God willing, we'll never really understand, and people should be praising them for everything, not yelling at them.
Well, and the difference here between this situation and the one at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut, is that these are young people who are old enough to understand what was going on and are old enough to understand that they do have a voice and that they can act on that. And you're right, Jess, I'm impressed with these young people as well. And I work with this generation on a daily basis. And I can't always say that, I think that they're headed in the right direction, but certainly watching these young people down in Parkland, Florida, it does give some hope to what seems like a hopeless situation. So I'm interested to see where it goes from here and how much change they are going to be able to make. I know that there's a group from the school and from across Florida that's going to be lobbying the Florida State Capitol in Tallahassee this week. And then I'm sure it will be spreading on to Washington, D.C. as well. So, I'm interested, and I'm going to be paying attention to this very closely.
And a lot of people on the right now are really pushing, well, how are they affording to go to Washington, D.C.? How are they getting buses to go to the Capitol? And they're trying to push that groups that lean left are giving them money to do these things and not focusing on the issues itself. One of the main things that come out in the early hours and early days after this happened was, we don't want your thoughts and prayers when you're taking lots of money from the NRA. And a lot of people put on Twitter, a lot of the members of the Senate and member of the House who take the most money from the NRA. One of the arguments that we see time and time again after a shooting is this for gun control laws? Is this mental health? And like I've said in the past, I'm not a gun expert. I'm not a mental health expert. And, mental health probably does play a part in it. But you're not going to convince me that a civilian needs a weapon that looks like an AR-15. I mean, it looks like something that Rambo would run around shooting. They say it's modern gun to shoot and go hunting with. But I can't imagine they can't pick something else that isn't something you'd see in a video game as you're killing terrorists.
Well, and the idea that it's to be used for hunting, most hunters I know don't want to obliterate the
Yeah.
target that they are hunting, especially if you're going to be using that, the venison meat or something that you'd like to use the meat for later. The AR-15, according to Time magazine reports, 6 out of the 10 deadliest mass shootings over the last decade in the United States, an AR-15 has been used. So we're seeing a pattern and a trend here, a very sad and sickening trend that shows us there is a problem with this weapon.
And I believe it was the AR-15 that was used at the worst mass shooting in Australian history. They then totally revamped their gun laws, and there hasn't been a shooting like this since. And that's something that probably should happen in this country, but people will hang on to the Second Amendment and won't let that happen. I mean, I have nothing against hunting, but I think you want to be a little sporting, don't you? I mean, if you can have a gun like that, can they just blow the brains out of the thing? What's the fun in that? My main problem is, if your first reaction after one of these horrible events happens is, oh no, they're coming for our guns, and not, how can we prevent this from ever happening again? Well, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, that's not the right attitude to have, and I can't imagine anybody with a heart really having that reaction.
Right, and it kind of shows us where our heads are at as a country, or at least a portion of our country, that their instinct is to go and grab their guns because the government's coming to take them away. And that's never actually been the case, right? They may be restricting certain types of guns, but that's for our own collective good. No one's trying to take away the Second Amendment.
The right to bear arms doesn't mean the right to bear whatever arms you want. It doesn't say you're entitled to any kind of weapon or gun they come up with, because it was written a long time ago. I love the Declaration of Independence, I love the Constitution, I love the Bill of Rights. These are the same documents that also were okay with slavery and had people worth, what was it, 2/3 of a person, 3/5 of a person,
3/5 compromise.
So these things are imperfect documents, which is why they've been amended throughout the years. So I don't hold any of this stuff as sacred text that can't be changed. So I don't know. If this stuff wasn't bad enough, Trump has just sent out a series of disgusting tweets, one that really bothered me more than any. He said, very sad that the FBI missed all of the many signals sent out by the Florida school shooter. This is not acceptable. I'm okay there. They are spending too much time trying to prove Russian collusion with the Trump campaign. There is no collusion. Get back to the basics and make us very proud. So Trump is trying to convince people that the Russian investigation is responsible for the shooting. I have no words. Well, that's not true. I always have words, but it blows my mind that he's trying to do that. And he got a lot of blowback on that.
Yeah, when everyone in the country is focused on victims and survivors, and Trump is focused on himself, it has to make us take pause for a moment and think about, hey, to those of you that voted for this man to put him in the position that he is, you get what you pay for sometimes, and that's what we're seeing. He is who he is, and we should have seen this coming. But we deserve better than that.
And by the way, the FBI is a big organization. It's not like, oh, I had Joe working on the Russia case, but I'm going to put him now on the shooting case. They have different areas that work with different issues. It's ridiculous to even insinuate that. So if you look at the criticism that Trump has gotten over some of these comments, the most scathing reviews have come from the students who survived themselves. And I've heard some of these stories. I'm sitting here crying while reading. One was a kid was hiding in a closet and texting his brother saying that he hasn't been a good enough brother and that he might never see him again. It's making me tear up right now. But as you see some of these things come through, they say 17 of my classmates are gone. That's 17 futures, 17 children, 17 friends stolen. But you're right. It always has to be about you. How silly of me to forget. # never again. My friends were brutally murdered, and you have the nerve to make this about Russia. I cannot believe this. Oh my God, 17 of my classmates and friends are gone, and you have the audacity to make this about Russia. Have a damn heart. You can keep all of your fake and meaningless thoughts and prayers. Those are coming from people who were in this just a week ago. And, the words speak more than Trump's ever could.
In the words of Douglas High School student Emma Gonzalez, we call BS, right? And, of course, that's made the rounds on TV, news outlets, and the internet. But she's absolutely right. You can say all these things all you want. You can offer these thoughts and prayers, but that's not action. That doesn't actually change anything for the better. And if you are somebody who has survived such a tragic event like this, that is a slap in your face.
So what's going to actually happen? Probably nothing. Who knows? At least today, Trump directed the Attorney General to propose changes that would ban the bump fire stocks. Those were used famously recently in the Las Vegas shooting. They make it easier to fire rounds more quickly, basically turning a semi-automatic weapon into an automatic. But again, he has said this should happen. But what would actually happen? I mean, Congress has to step up to the plate and do something. Because if not, they're just really bowing down to what you'd call their NRA overlord. I mean, the NRA lobbyists are the kind of lobbyists that make people like me, when I was a lobbyist, look bad when people think they're horrible people, because they value having a gun more so than preventing another life from being taken. It's really just sad.
And Jesse, you used to live around the corner from their headquarters in Fairfax, Virginia, and I used to shudder every time I drive by it going to visit you. So yeah, no, I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, driving home on Route 66, I saw it every day. I actually knew some people who used to work there, but that's a story for another day. So from one depressing topic to another, depressing that it's affecting our country. It's not depressing because something's actually getting done. Last Friday, Special Counsel Robert Mueller released a 37-page indictment, which is quite a page-turner, if I may add, and it lays out how the Russian government tried to interfere in the 2016 election. There are 16 defendants. It includes 3 organizations and 13 individuals who are charged with conspiracy to defraud the U.S. by impairing enforcement of the election law, as well as wire fraud and bank fraud. It's beginning. It's the start.
It's happening.
It's happening. Woo! I mean, they're saying this began as early as 2014. There were operations to interfere with everything, and it's really interesting to see what comes of this, what comes next. They said by early to mid-2016, their operations included supporting presidential campaigns of Donald Trump and disparaging Hillary Clinton, and defendants were conspiring to obstruct the lawful functions of the United States government through fraud and deceit. And that's not good for something we hold so sacred as elections, Kevin.
Well, but wait a minute. Before we get ahead of ourselves here, the president previously called it a hoax. So, this all just must be fake news, right?
No, if you listen to Sarah Huckabee Sanders today, he never said it was a hoax. He always said it was real. He just said that it didn't affect the election. I mean, again, they're trying to gaslight us into saying that he never said things. But guess what? It's all there on Twitter. We can all go and reference it. We've retweeted some of this stuff ourselves. You can lie to yourselves, but you can't lie to the American people. At least enough of them are smart enough to be able to call them out on that nonsense.
Yeah, some of us check our facts.
Yeah. They also said that they engage in operations primarily intended to communicate derogatory information about Hillary Clinton and even other people who were running against Trump, like Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. But they wanted to support people like Trump and even Bernie Sanders, basically just trying to get as many things going that would sow discontent or make things as difficult as possible going into the actual general election. And we saw that. We saw a lot of people who were upset because Hillary got the nomination. We saw people obviously not happy with Trump, so they worked. It was successful.
In other words, anything to get the Russian puppet into the White House.
And by the way, Trump just tweeted this out. Bad ratings CNN and MSNBC got scammed when they covered the anti-Trump Russia rally wall to wall. They probably knew it was fake news, but because it was a rally against me, they pushed hard anyways. Again, he's just trying to push anything that Russia's fake. Everything that's covered about Russia is fake. I'm the best. Yada, yada, yada. It's really just sad. But specialists were instructed who worked for Russia to post content to criticize politics in the United States and do everything. I mean, here are some of the hashtags they used or some of the lines they used. Hashtag Hillary Clinton is not my president. Join our hashtag Hillary Clinton for President 2016. Donald wants to defeat terrorism. Hillary wants to sponsor it. Hillary Clinton doesn't deserve the black vote. Hillary Clinton has already committed voter fraud during the Democratic Iowa caucus. And this is the one that, they're really going to get someone who can speak English better. Hillary is a Satan, and her crimes and lies have proved just how evil she is. She wouldn't be a Satan. She just would be Satan.
Well, and this just proves, the dropping education level and critical thinking level of the American public, that they couldn't pick this out. Because so many Americans don't read anymore. They don't have good grammar, and they didn't know that this was grammatically incorrect to even question it.
Hillary is a Satan. Sounds like an American to me. Good old red state. But with $1 million and a whole bunch of people, Russia was able to just sow enough discord in this country to elect Trump. Again, it helped. They were stirring up the Bernie pot. You were feeling the burn. Does that bother you at all?
Well, no, I think my reasoning for supporting Bernie Sanders was had nothing to do with any kind of Russian involvement through fake Facebook posts. But I can see how this would cause a problem. I can see exactly what they were getting at, right? The two extremes. Let's get them to go against each other and butt heads and sow discord. And they succeeded to an extent.
And honestly, some of the most damaging things they did was probably related to Jill Stein. They had some fake Instagram accounts posting, choose peace and vote for Jill Stein. Trust me, it's not a wasted vote. Well, guess what? Yeah, it was a wasted vote. I don't want to deter third-party candidates, but at least at the presidential level, it's a wasted vote. They're not going to win. And if you look at all the votes that went for Stein in places like Michigan, I think there were 40,000, and she lost by 10,000 or something like that. It obviously, if those votes for Stein would have gone to Clinton, it's just at least a majority of them would have. She would have won Michigan. So they knew what they were doing, and again, they were very successful at it.
Yeah, had people thought critically, used common sense, and hey, maybe even studied history. Look at Ralph Nader in 2000.
Yeah,
they would have known better than to do that.
If you're listening to our podcast, I assume you probably already know this, but just to people who may not be familiar, if you're voting for a third-party candidate and say that third-party candidate is to the left of center, you're hurting the more mainstream Democrat candidate. If they're more right of center, like, say, Ross Perot, you're hurting the more right candidate, the more conservative candidate. So you're just hurting the candidate you would prefer out of the main two. So just don't vote. I would say it's okay to vote if it's, a done deal, but if this past election showed us anything, there's no such thing as a done deal.
No, and the way our country currently stands, the political partisanship, I doubt we'll have these types of blowout elections anymore. They're going to come down to the wire because we are so divided on this. So your vote does matter, and you should probably vote for the more mainstream candidate if you really want to see, some change, or you really want to see something happen in your favor.
And back to Trump. So he says, okay, Russia did do it. Even if they didn't affect the outcome of the election, they tried to. That's the very least you could tell Donald Trump. Why aren't you putting these sanctions against Russia? We say this time and time again. The Congress overwhelmingly, almost unanimously voted for these sanctions against Russia, yet he hasn't done it yet. So Huckabee Sanders is saying that Trump has been tougher against Russia than Obama was in 8 years. Well, then show us. Put your money where your mouth is and put these sanctions against Russia. Show Putin that at least you have some kind of spine.
Yeah, we could hope. Don't see it happening.
No. So are we thinking this is just the first domino to drop? Is this investigation far from over? Fingers crossed.
Every time we get these little bits of hope here, then things slow down and we have to wait. And I get people asking me questions like, well, when's it going to happen? It's taking too long. I remind them that from Watergate until President Nixon's resignation was 2 years. So we're only 1 year in. We've got another year to go where all this could catch up to the president. So we shall see.
It's a generational thing. We get the internet now. We want things now. Amazon delivers in 2 days. We don't want to wait years for stuff. We want instant gratification.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's better to think things through.
Yeah. Well, I think it was Saturday night, Trump went on, and I guess into Sunday morning, Trump went on a Twitter storm. It was pretty crazy. And I actually woke up. I wasn't ready to get out of bed yet, but I woke up, looked at my phone, and took a screen capture because I was convinced he was going to delete it, even though he didn't. He tweeted out that Russia is laughing their asses off at us. And the president tweeted out asses. It sounds so stupid because you can see that on TV nowadays, no big deal. But the president just being that crude to the American people, this is something that just a year and a half ago we would never have expected it. We couldn't see it happening, and now it's just a regular occurrence.
Well, we know he's not presidential. Heck, his main mode of communication to the American people is through Twitter.
Yeah. Well, that's how he gets around the fake news media. He can talk directly to the people, don't you know?
Yes, with his rude and crass commentary.
Well, Kevin, I guess the only thing we can do right now is just wait and see what Mueller does next. There's been some interesting developments going on, and I guess we'll see what becomes of it in the coming days, months, and maybe even years.
As always, on the edge of our seats.
Kevin, before we go any further, I want to talk a little bit about today's sponsor, Ecosia. Ecosia is an awesome alternative to Google. Everybody should be using. You should be using it. I should be using it. I am using it. It's an ethical way to browse the internet. Now, what does that mean? Ecosia invests their profit to plant trees and regenerate deforested lands all around the world. How cool is that?
Now, here's how it works. You search the web with Ecosia. Search ads generate revenue. At least 80% of their surplus income goes to planting trees. Literally, all you have to do is what you're already doing. Search the internet.
Over 20 million trees have already been planted, and with your help, Ecosia can reach 1 billion by 2020.
Ecosia has created a special URL so that our listeners can plant trees together. Go to ecosia.co/pod. That's ecosia.co/pod.
You're going to search the internet anyways. Why not plant a tree while you're at it? Well, the next thing we're going to get to, Kevin, is the DACA votes that have been going on over the last week. We've been talking about DACA on this podcast for a long, long time. And on Thursday, the Senate voted on 4 separate DACA bills. And guess what? They all failed. Is that a surprise?
Yeah, it's important to remember that what's at stake here is for real people. They are more than just figures. They're more than just the immigrants that we've kind of demonized. Or certain members of the government have demonized. These are real people who are living amongst us in our country, that are paying into our economy, that are productive members of our society, and that there is real consequences at stake for them here.
Real consequences that I'm not sure a lot of people in Congress actually care about, which is really sad. So we're going to go over the 4 bills really quickly, just to let you know what the options were and what happened. The first was a Coons-McCain bill. Unfortunately, John McCain wasn't even there. He's still recovering from the cancer treatment he's been going through. That provided a pathway to citizenship for 1.8 million undocumented immigrants who came to this country as children. It offered no money for the Trump border wall, although it did increase border security by some. It failed 52-47, with Democrats almost all in favor and Republicans almost all against it. The next one was the Toomey Amendment, which basically criticizes sanctuary cities, wants to withhold federal funding from them. That failed 54-45. The one that should have passed was the third one. That's the Common Sense Caucus, and that's the large bipartisan group led by Susan Collins, who's a Republican that had a lot of bipartisan support. That would provide citizenship for 1.8 million undocumented immigrants, would give $25 billion for border security, would prevent DACA recipients from sponsoring their parents for legal status, and that failed 54-45. Democrats almost unanimously backed the plan, and 8 Republicans backed it. And then the final one was the Grassley bill, which is AKA the Trump bill, and this did the worst out of any of them. It's basically everything Trump wants and more. Provided a path to citizenship for 1.8 million undocumented immigrants, offered $25 billion to fund the wall, substantially cut family immigration, and eliminated the diversity visa lottery program. That failed 39-60, not even close. Democrats opposed the bill, joined by a lot of other notable Republicans. So they just can't get a compromise going, can they?
No, and on top of all this, the DACA stuff doesn't do anything to address the other immigrants with temporary protected status from countries like Honduras, Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Haiti. The president suggested that this protection should end as well as DACA, and these are people who are here because their home countries are struggling to recover from disaster or war, and it's a humanitarian measure. Undoing these programs should be seen as inhumane. So we need to get something passed. And there is good common sense, as the caucus is named. There's common sense legislation out there, but the president is taking his ball and going home simply because he's not getting his way.
I mean, lots of Puerto Rico is still having a lot of trouble recovering from the hurricanes, and you think the president cares anything about these countries that you know what he calls these countries, and we won't repeat it on here. Unfortunately, he just doesn't care about them. So what did we learn from this whole thing? So a bill without any funding for Trump's border wall is a non-starter for Republicans, which is ridiculous because, again, the border funding and DACA, it's 2 different things, 2 different issues. The common sense plan failed because Trump threatened to veto it. I mean, he basically said it's ridiculous, it's not good, and that killed it before it was even voted on, and that was the only bill that had any realistic chance of passing. Trump's plan can't pass the Senate either, so nothing can pass. We're at an impasse right now, and like you said, it's the people affected by DACA, it's the people who need our help who are getting hurt in the process.
Right. These are real lives. Once again, I cannot stress that enough. I mean, these are people that you know. You may not realize who they are, but they're living amongst us, and they are good people that are doing good things for our communities and our society at large. So we've got to do something. We owe that to them, and we owe it to ourselves. You know, in the words of Ronald Reagan, if we're that shining beacon on a hill, this democracy in the world that everybody else looks up to, then we can't afford to let ourselves down in that way.
And you know who wants to help these people more than any other politician that's spoken out from the right? President George W. Bush. He is the one coming out saying these people deserve to stay here. He had the highest approval rating by a Republican, by Hispanics by far. And the fact that you have the last Republican president speaking out in direct opposition to what the president and the Republican Congress want, it's very telling how things have changed in just 9 years.
It has, and I've said it before. I'll say it again. The person who comes out smelling like roses and all of this is George W. Bush.
Oh, yeah. I mean, people, they made a joke about it on Saturday Night Live a couple weeks ago, but people who would love to have George W. Bush back, even the people who, were calling him a traitor 8 years ago because Donald Trump is just that much worse. And by the way, during this whole process, the most insane thing happened. The Secretary of Homeland Security released an insane statement that if you look at, the Homeland Security has only been around for a few years, but if you look at past statements, I can't believe it would come out. It wrote, the Schumer-Rounds-Collins, and by the way, Rounds and Collins are both Republicans, so they're freaking out of their own party. The Schumer-Rounds-Collins proposal destroys the ability of the men and women of the Department of Homeland Security to remove millions of illegal immigrants, or illegal aliens, they say, not immigrants. That's me cleaning it up without even meaning to. It would be the end of the immigration enforcement in America and only serve to draw millions more illegal aliens with no ways to remove them. I mean, come on. They're like, if you pass this bill, it's the end of the world. Calm down there.
Yeah, I hardly believe so.
Yeah, and Trump, who, again, he's trying to sneak one past us and gaslight us, said, can't believe how badly DACA recipients have been treated by Democrats. Totally abandoned. Republicans are working hard. What? What are they talking about? There are some things you can try to say, Republicans are helping you with tax cuts where Democrats won't, and that's up for debate or whatever. But when it comes to things like DACA, no, it's very obvious the Democrats are the ones that are fighting for them, and the Republicans are just pushing for their border wall.
Yeah, it's laughable because if you can't laugh, you'll cry.
Yeah, really. There's so much going on in this world today that, again, you laugh or you say don't cry. And let's just remember what he said back when this whole started. If they come to me with things I'm not in love with, I'm going to do it because I respect them. That didn't last long. And that's what's going to happen again with gun control, I think. He'll say he'll sign whatever, and then, no, the NRA will get in their ear and he won't do it. So, whatevs. Well, before we go on to Kevin's Corner, there's a few odds and ends I want to talk about. One, Oprah was on 60 Minutes on Sunday night, and she interviewed 14 Michigan voters who had voted for Trump, and she had met with them previously last fall, and just kind of checking back in with them again. This caused Trump to tweet out, just watched a very insecure Oprah Winfrey, who at one point I knew very well, interview a panel of people on 60 Minutes. The questions were biased and slanted, the facts incorrect. Hope Oprah runs so she can be exposed and defeated like all of the others. Now, I'm no Oprah fan, Kevin, but if I was going to call her anything, it would never be insecure.
Oh, not at all. She's probably one of the least insecure people in this country, if not the world over.
She, you get a car, she acts like a lunatic on her show, and people love it. It's part of her charm, I guess. People are really just saying that Trump is projecting. He's the one that's insecure and nervous about Oprah, and he's putting it out there. But it's just so stupid. Like, why even comment on it at all? I don't get it.
Biased questions, slanted questions, incorrect facts. It sounds an awful lot like a Fox News broadcast.
Of course. Well, that's state-run media today. Trump also kind of went after H.R. McMaster. He was speaking at a conference in Germany over the weekend, and he's the national security advisor, if you don't know. He had said that it was beyond dispute that Russia affected our elections, or they tried to interfere with our elections. And Trump at 11:22 on a Saturday night, when most people, if you're in your 20s, are out drinking, if you're like my age, you're in bed watching TV, he tweeted out, General McMaster forgot to say that the results of the 2016 election were not impacted or changed by the Russians, and the only collusion was between Russia and Crooked H, which there's no proof of that whatsoever, the DNC and the Dems. Remember the dirty dossier, uranium, speeches, emails, the Podesta company? Come on, Trump. Come on.
He is delusional and childlike. He's putting a disclaimer on his own national security advisor.
Yeah. Well, today, Sarah Sanders came out and said that, Trump was very happy with what he said. He just wanted to add an addendum. Well, it didn't sound like that when he tweeted out. It sounded like he was pissed that he didn't speak on Trump's behalf and in the Trump fashion. I don't know. And the last thing I want to bring up just very quickly is Mitt Romney has announced he's running for Senate. Yesterday, Trump said he supports him, and Mitt said, thank you, and I hope I have the support of the people of Utah. Mitt is one of the people who kind of came out smelling like roses in this whole thing. People are like, oh, Mitt Romney for president wouldn't have been so bad now that you see Trump. But the fact that he basically called Trump a fraud like a year ago, and now he's kind of taking his support, I don't know how that sits with me. Not very well.
Yeah, this idea of, anybody else for president, Romney, Bush, it kind of sets a low bar that we have now. To me, Mitt Romney, we know that he's a moderate Republican. I
voted for Romney. I'll say that.
He was the governor of Massachusetts, one of the most liberal states in the union. So he has to be. But to me, I look at this as, is this potential carpetbagging? He hasn't spent much of his life in Utah. He has roots there. His family, obviously, from there. But can any famous Mormon just show up and run for office in that state and win?
Well, Hillary was a senator from New York. So
right, I agree. I mean, I see that as carpetbagging as well.
Yeah. It's we even had Scott Brown. He was senator from Massachusetts, and he ran in New Hampshire too, just over the border. Stone's throw away. I mean, it's as long as there's been politics, there's going to be carpetbagging, and it's so silly. I mean, I guess Romney was kind of, what was he going to say? And, I was reading today saying, well, now Trump can take credit for Romney's win, even though it's Mitt Romney in Utah, and he was going to win anyways. And now Trump will say, oh, he wasn't doing so good. It didn't look good, but then I supported him, and now it's great. Trump said that, Mitt would have gotten on his knees and begged him for his support previously, which, gives uncomfortable visuals, at least to me.
I don't see that, and I certainly see this as Trump trying to get on the good side of most likely the next senator from Utah who could tip the balance in the Senate against Donald Trump, because we know that Romney is no fan.
But it's one of the things I've been reading is that, Romney's been very critical of Trump, and he'll get elected and he'll just be a rank and file Republican and won't stand up to Trump. I hope it's not the case. I mean, I understand that Trump does have a lot of Republican, or pushes some Republican values, and that Republicans, I have no problem if they vote with him, even if I disagree with it. It's when he does things that are unconscionable or just ridiculous and they don't stand up to him, that's when it really upsets me. And I hope Romney, if and probably when he's elected, he does that. I mean, we've seen Orrin Hatch, his predecessor, really just pucker up and kiss Trump in the butt and say how lucky we are to have a president like Trump, which is ridiculous. I used to work on a committee with him, but, what are you going to do? All right, Kev, what do you have for Kevin's Corner this week?
Well, Jess, as we've said before, America has a problem when it comes to guns. Whether the day-to-day statistics in our inner cities or the mass shootings that have become all too commonplace in the last several years, we cannot shake the deadly scourge of guns. The argument has been made that our problem is not with guns, rather with mental health, and that it is the unstable people who use guns to commit murder. However, the problem is that the people in positions of power lack the courage to make laws in the best interest of all Americans, not just those of a special interest. There are members of our Congress that have actively worked to increase access to guns while simultaneously seeking to limit access to affordable health care, including for mental health. While some politicians are offering hollow thoughts and prayers and criticizing others for wanting to politicize such a tragedy, it is promising to see the young people who will forever live the traumatic experience in Parkland, Florida, stepping up to take ownership of the change we so desperately need. The tide is turning. Representatives don't last forever, and the era of complacency and bowing down to big money is about to change.
As always, right on point, Kevin. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for, again, doing this podcast with me for the last year. There's no one I would rather do this podcast with, and I'm excited what the future may hold.
We're on to year number 2.
Woohoo! First is the worst, second is the best. I don't know, maybe that's how the president's work will do as well. We can only hope.
Well, I'm not so sure that's a good thing. That means we're on to year number 2 of a Trump presidency as well. But
bum. Yeah, as we've always said, we look forward to the day this podcast ends, because it means there's just not enough going on in the world of politics to have a podcast every week. Things are slow. Things are normal. But
this is not normal.
This is not normal. That is correct. All right. Thank you to all of our wonderful listeners. Make sure to go to our webpage at grabthembythepod.com. You can see links to all of our social media accounts, see our beautiful, handsome faces, and you can even send us an email if you so desire. So until next time, Kev, it's been fun.
Later.